And Miss Rita Flowers had to be all of 80. Like 5 minutes into us shooting the basketball, Miss Rita Flowers, 80 years old, is running down the street, hits the corner, screaming, "No! Come back!" We were playing basketball on a court that was a gang's court, right? And she said that at any moment you could have been shot. And this is not just in Belize that I know this to be true, but in Africa and Honduras and many other places that I've gone to, where they actually have to pay for school, not higher education as we do in the States for like colleges and postgraduate and all those other things, but school itself at a foundational level has to be paid for in a lot of these countries that I visit. And when I come over here to the States and we are offering education free of charge, and people are not taking advantage of those opportunities, I sound like a man, beating a drum. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why are you not going to school? Well, I don't want to go to school. It's because they actually have no vantage point of how valuable the opportunities that they have here in the States. What is the average salary of somebody in Belize or Gales Point? What's the average salary?
Well, Gales Point average salary is really low. I mean, some people are probably making, $200-300 a month.
Now, $200 to $300 a month. You're talking about Belizean, or is that U.S.?
That's Belize dollars in Gales Point.
So 300 Belize dollars is 150. So let's look at Gales Point. So Gales Point is making $150 U.S. School is how much on average? Let's say high school.
High school per year on average is about $600.
Okay, so if we're making $150 a month, $600 of that goes towards high school. There's a great financial distress that's going on in the village, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's huge.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Studio B. I am your host, Pastor MDH. Thank you so very much for joining us here on the set today. Make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe, and even share this video with all of your friends and family so that you don't miss anything going on the set of Studio B. Today on the set is a very good friend of mine, Pastor Kenneth Welch, affectionately known as Pastor Kenny, and he is from Belize. He's a Belizean. First of all, welcome to Texas, first time in Texas, and then welcome to the set of Studio B. How you doing, Kenny?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me here.
He says thanks. Thanks. Man, just a wonderful accent, man. I love that accent. So we've been in community now for about 6 years. We take mission teams down to Belize. And little did we know on that first trip 6 years ago that God was going to foster the relationship that he has. I love Belize, and I want to talk to you about all things Belize and kind of your experience, and see even some of the things in which you compare Belize to the States. Okay? But kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Well, Kenneth Welch, that's my name. Everybody call me Kenny, or if you're down in Gales Point, where we do ministry a lot with Bethels, it's Pastor. That's just how they say it. Married, been married 10 years, have 2 daughters, 1 7, 1 3. I love them to death, although they try to kill me most of the time. That's just how life goes. Yeah, and I'm doing ministry in 2 different parts of Belize. We lead a small church on the south side of Belize City in one of the rough neighborhoods, and we also lead the church down in Gales Point, where we do ministry with Bethels.
In a rough part of the neighborhood. So you got ministry in 2 rough neighborhoods. So, man, one of the things that I love about you, Kenny, is that one, you got a heart for your family, man, and that's always a big deal for me because I like family men. I like men that are well vested in their families. But kind of talk about the life of Belize. Now, I'll talk about it from my vantage point, but I want to hear your perspective, and especially from Gales Point. Gales Point, you got to be really intentional about finding it because it's way off the beaten path. So it's not a touristy area. So you got to be very, very intentional about going there. But as I've noticed Gales Point over the last 6 years, I have a perspective. But tell me about your perspective as somebody that was born and raised in Gales Point.
Well, Gales Point, like you said, it's unique. It's what we would consider to be the native Creole community of the country of Belize. Runaway slaves found their way to this nice little pristine peninsula out there, kind of in the middle of nowhere, beautiful place. And that's where they settled, and it became known as Gales Point. Now, to us, it's home. More than just a unique place, it's a place that has always been sort of self-sustaining, fishing, farming community as it progressed. And it continues to flourish slowly and progress, not in the way that people would hope, or not as fast as people would hope, but it's still going and still chugging along, even in a time where, everything is just prospering. We're just chugging along slowly and getting there, by God's grace.
And so Gales Point does have a very rich history to it. So it's this little, as you said, peninsula that's just kind of sticking out into the lagoon area. Beautiful place, beautiful people. But as you look at Gales Point, as in the rest of Belize, describe Gales Point as opposed to the rest of Belize.
Well, if you look at it from that vantage point, we would be considered to be far behind. When you look at Gales Point, it's like a community that it's not only out there on its own, but it's a community that we sometimes refer to it as the forgotten community in the country. One of the forgotten community, because it's still almost stuck in its old ways, although new things are being introduced, but it's not. Life in Gales Point is not progressing as the rest of the country is progressing. It's not as advanced as the rest of the country is advanced,
Now, because when I came down in 2000, well, whenever that was, 6 years ago, 2014, 15, whenever that was, I was introduced to Gales Point with that statement that we're going to go and see the forgotten people. And when I heard that from a pastor friend of mine, I was like, what does that mean? The forgotten people. And now my first introduction into Gales Point was at night.
Yeah.
We didn't go in the daytime. That is an experience, first time experience. That is an experience coming down the coastal road for an hour and a half, pitch black, not knowing where you're going. I still remember the chatter of the missionaries in the van. Oh my gosh. So that was my first introduction. So you're going down this coastal road, and it's a four-wheel experience. If you had an ATV, this would be the road that you would want to ride on. And so we're going down this road for an hour and a half, and then we pull up into this village. And again, it's nighttime. It's pitch black. So we don't actually get to see Gales Point until the morning. And but it was introduced to me as the forgotten people. Now tell me why though? Why is that the moniker or was the moniker for Gales Point?
I mean, I think it's more along the lines where everywhere else is advancing and getting the help that they need to progress. Gales Point seems to be lacking that, especially from the governmental side of things. We do have like an area representative and all of that, but because the community is so small, because its voting population per se is so small, we don't really count. We don't really add much. We're not as valuable, I would say, to them as bigger communities are. And the village has always been in a position where even the leadership of the village per se were mostly self-seeking people. They were not like village-seeking people. So then leaders of the village would reap the sweets from, the government or the area representative, and then the majority of the people would just be left hanging. So there was never real big or huge government interest in helping to develop, helping to move the people from one condition to the other.
And Gales and Belize is one of these kind of touristy spots. So every time we fly into the country, we see a lot of people that are flying into Belize for the purposes of leisure and vacation and jet skis and scuba diving and all that other good stuff. So Belize is known for that. But on the backside of Belize, when you're going into Gales Point, it seems as though, as you said, Belize as a whole, as a country, is progressing forward. But this small little community of how many people are in Gales Point?
Right now, I think we're at about 230, 250.
So 250 people in the village.
Yeah.
And in this village lifestyle, as you go back there, you guys got a school. You are and one of the reasons why I navigated to Pastor Kenny is that you are the only church, the only spiritual force in that entire community. And as we go through Gales Point, we see a lot of different stuff. A lot of different stuff. What's one of the greatest needs that you see in your community?
Right now, besides spiritual, a lot of people have physical needs, but their physical needs can be met if their mindset would be changed, somewhat. If they would just think differently, one would say, or learn to understand things differently, Next to that would be educational needs. A lot of kids in school, elementary school, they're getting ready to exit elementary school, but still in a place where they're not able to read and comprehend well. So when they move on to high school, it's, failing and dropping out because that foundation wasn't really set for them.
Now let's talk about the education, because I want you to bring your story into this. So you were born and raised in Gales Point.
Yeah.
Okay. But you were allowed to get an education. So you graduated from college and have a degree in marine biology, I believe. Okay. So how did you get that degree? I mean, knowing what I know about Gales Point, how did Kenneth Welch come out of Gales Point with a bachelor's degree in marine biology, considering where he came from? How did that happen?
Well, I actually have 3 associates, not a bachelor's.
Oh, okay, 3 associates. Okay, praise God. How did that happen?
So my mom, basically, she was a school teacher in her early years, and she kind of saved up some little bit of money, which she spent her life savings getting me just through high school.
Now, what does that look like? What do you mean? So you got to pay for high school?
Yeah, you got to pay for high school. Most high schools are around $700 or $800 a year. Then you got to buy books and uniform and all that.
So in Belize, you have to pay. At what point do you have to start paying for school? The entire time?
The entire time. I mean, elementary is kind of cheap. Like in Gales Point, your elementary fees is like, I don't know, $20 or something. When you move up to the city, it gets higher. If you go to private school, it's way high.
Now I'm gonna table that because I need to come back to that. So in Belize, you have to pay to go to school. Okay, continue.
Yeah. So she spent everything she had getting me through high school, and then after high school, I had applied for junior college, but I had no idea what was going on. So when I got the acceptance letter and saw in there what it would cost to go to school, I went to the assistant dean of the school at that time and asked if I could delay my acceptance so that I could go find a job, make some money so I could pay for it. And she was, such a kind and sweet lady. She was like, what if I give you a work scholarship so you can go to school? But then one work scholarship was only like $500 a semester. So I told her, even with that, I still have to work and find more money to fill in what's missing. And then she decided to give me 2 work scholarships. So I'd be working in 2 different departments at the school so that I could go to school. That is how I was able to get my first associates in just general studies. That's what it was called at the time. And then after I graduated from that junior college, I spent 1 year doing kind of like an internship with a environmental organization, studying manatees and other stuff. And after spending that year, I got offered an opportunity by a lady who was good friends with my grandpa to go back to school, and she would help flip the bill for that. So that is how I was able to go to the University of Belize and double major in marine science and biology. And so that's how I ended up making it through college, getting those 3 associates degree. It was all because people saw that I don't know what they saw in me to invest and to help me get an education.
Now, would you say that education has immensely helped you?
Definitely.
Now, I'm very curious in this because now I'm going to backtrack because I've said you're familiar with all of the melee that is going on in the States in this Western culture, and even some stuff that has kind of dribbled over into Belize. But I've often said many times, Kenny, that people do not have a broad enough perspective to enjoy or to appreciate where they are in life because they're constantly scratching for what they think they need and want, and don't take the time to enjoy what they actually have. You guys have to pay for elementary, middle school, for high school, and yet here in the States, so there's no government subsidies for education from elementary all the way up to high school?
When you get to high school, the government helps to pay, I think, half of your first 2 years. That was a program that was instituted. So I think first they were giving you $300 towards your school tuition for first and second year of high school. And then it dropped to $200 last I checked. And right now we're not sure if they're still doing it or not because there's all kind of stuff going on with the government. No money, the country is broke, so we don't know if they're gonna still do that. People do have the opportunity to get scholarships, but for most of those, it's on a who you know basis and not what you know. So all the people who can afford to pay for school, but they're good friends with people who gives out scholarship, they still get the scholarship. And usually, the kids who really need it are not in a position to get it.
So I am a very big proponent in education, not even necessarily higher learning, but education, being able to expand your mind. So in Belize, you have to pay for elementary, middle school, and for high school. Okay. Here in the States, all of those things are free. Like you get elementary, middle school, and high school for free. Right, you get free. Now it's not free. Somebody's paying for it, of course, but there are educational opportunities for those in the States free of charge. And this is not just in Belize that I know this to be true, but in Africa and Honduras and many other places that I've gone to where they actually have to pay for school, not higher education as we do in the States for like colleges and postgraduate and all those other things, but school itself at a foundational level has to be paid for in a lot of these countries that I visit. And when I come over here to the States and we are offering education free of charge, and people are not taking advantage of those opportunities, I sound like a man, beating a drum. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why are you not going to school? Well, I don't want to go to school. It's because they actually have no vantage point of how valuable the opportunities that they have here in the States. What is the average salary of somebody in Belize or Gales Point? What's the average salary?
Well, Gales Point average salary is really low. I mean, some people are probably making, $200-300 a month.
Now, $200 to $300 a month. You're talking about Belizean, or is that U.S.?
That's Belize dollars in Gales Point.
Okay.
I mean, cost of living in Gales Point is not as high as in the city or other places. When you look at the city, I would assume average salary is probably around 1,000 Belize dollars a month.
Okay, so 1,000 Belize dollars is 500 US.
Yeah.
So 300 Belize dollars is 150. So let's look at Gales Point. So Gales Point is making $150 US. School is how much on average? Let's say high school.
High school per year on average is about $600.
Okay, so if we're making $150 a month, $600 of that goes towards high school. There's a great financial distress that's going on in the village, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the education that is available that cannot be afforded, we have a whole lot of people that are not educated, right?
Yeah.
And do you see the results of that not having education playing out in the villages of Gales Point?
Yeah, definitely. It's huge.
So how do you because I'm going somewhere here, Kenny, because we've seen these schools and as I've walked into the school at Gales Point, I remember this 2018, I saw a teacher that was that brother said, felt like, you know what? Forget this, forget y'all. I'm on the first thing smoking out of this place. And I saw on this teacher's face an exasperated look that I haven't seen in a minute. And then I seen kids literally just getting up and walking out of class and walking home. Like in the middle of the teacher speaking, kid, I was vividly, he gets up and walks out the class and starts walking home. How important is education in Gales Point? Is it because it's a financial liability, or they just don't see the value in it?
I think right now people are just not seeing the value in it. I mean, when I was a kid going to elementary school in Gales Point, we couldn't do half of the things these kids are doing today. You know, like they were still able to lash you at school, and you know, parents not going to say nothing about it.
That means whoop you, by the way.
What they call it, corporal punishment.
Yeah, we call it getting your butt whooped. You know, teachers were able to put that wood to you. Okay, go on.
Yeah, so I feel like in my generation growing up, it was always stressed how important it was, you know, to learn to read, to get an education, to learn how to do your math and stuff like that. I think like for these kids today, especially as we look at the village right now, most of the kids going to school, you could tell the families who really stress how important education is to their kid. Because those kids are well behaved in school, they do their work, you know, they're trying to get somewhere. But those families who are not stressing the importance of education, those are the kids who are giving trouble in class, those are the kids getting up, walking around, those are the kids showing up at school when they're ready and going home when they're ready, you know.
So you got a degree, and tell the story, Kenny. You have chosen by God's will and by his providence to go and reinvest your time back into the community that you were born and raised in. But God has allowed you to have a degree that you could be doing other things with.
Yeah.
So talk about that process of you being led by God to, with a degree in an area where degrees are not common, to where you could raise your standard of living exponentially and, you know, get out of the hood and do some other things. God has called you back to that community to serve in a pastoral capacity. Talk about how that came about and why are you vested in Gales Point?
So everything that's going on is completely a move of God. Growing up, it was the religious thing for people to go to church on Sunday. So everybody was almost always at church at some point, you know, until you get old enough and you decide, I don't want to go to church on Sunday. But it was never in any of my plans to be involved in church more than just going and sitting in the pews. You know, never have I ever thought of, you know, even helping out at church. Those were never in my plans. I was supposed to be the kid who was smart, who would get a degree, graduate, be somebody, and be able to help out financially, you know. But in 2007, 2008, that's when I met David Stockton. He's the senior pastor at Living Streams in Phoenix. And that's when life kind of started to shift for me, you know, talking to him, being ministered to by him, getting involved in Bible studies and other stuff that I kind of saw as distance from me, but then it became closer to me, you know, and he invested in me. He left, another guy came. And this was the crazy part when the second guy came, Mike Pfeiffer. Because before David left, he said, I think you're going to like Mike. He's a little crazy, right? And I didn't give that much thought. And then when Mike came, Mike was like, hey, I'm going to have you start to preach on Sunday. And then I'm thinking, so David was right. This guy is crazy, you know, because me preaching where? Dude, I'm content just hanging out here and hanging with you guys. I don't want to do anything with this church thing. And lo and behold, I was going on my second year of marine science and biology in university when he came and told me that, you know. And slowly but surely, all those pieces began to fit together. I hung out with him some more. he started to teach me more stuff about the Bible and about God and how to prepare a message and how to do all these things. And before I knew it, I was preaching my first service on a Sunday morning, you know. No, the first one was weird. I have all people in the church who watch me grow up. Yeah. So it's kind of like this kid that we used to watch run around is giving a message on Sunday. So for the whole time, that whole 15 or 20 minutes that I was up there are 3 doors on the building. You notice, you've been there, you know, one to the east, one to the west, and one to the south. That was where my focus was. I was either looking through the door to the east, through the door to the west, or through the door to the south. And there was this missionary lady who was just sitting there. Every time I'm staring out the door, she'd be snapping her finger in the back to try and get me to at least, you know, wave my attention. But for me, it was scary. I'm thinking, like, what am I doing? Like, what do I have to say to these people who have watched me growing up? You know, I'm not smart enough. I haven't lived life enough to be able to relate to these people or to tell them anything. And after that, he had me preaching. For the first 2 months, it was one Sunday. Then he sped it up to 2 Sundays. And he had to leave early. Him and his family had to leave Gales Point early because his wife got sick. And then I was, like David liked to say, just thrown into the fire. So when
that's how it came about.
Yeah. So when they left, it was kind of like, all right, Kenny, you're up. And they left the same month I was graduating from school. So I graduated that May and started to preach full-time in Gales Point that same May.
Wow.
You know? And of course, for a lot of people, they were looking at it like something has to be wrong, you know. You've been going to school, you got a degree, you should be making a lot of money. Why would you just come back and sit here in this community with your local people preaching at church? You know, people were thinking, these, for a lack of a better word, white people must be paying you a lot of money to do this, you know, because it makes no sense for you to have a degree in a field where it's blooming and to just leave that right there and come and preach to us here. You know, that the church was kind of like in its rebuilding phase. There were maybe 10 or 12 people coming to church steadily on a Sunday. So it made no sense to the people. And at that time, when I first started out, you know, young, single, have no bills, nothing, I was getting $100 a week support. That's 100 Belize, so 50 US a week support was what I was, you know, living on to do that, which is even more reason for people to say this makes no sense, you know. But that is honestly where I felt like the Holy Spirit was calling me to, like it wasn't calling me to go out, get a job, you know, work out there, drive back home on Sunday and preach. It was calling me to invest time, talent, and treasure into the life of the people of Gales Point.
So you never had any conversations with God about like what's going on here? This ain't what I signed up to do. I mean, what does that process look like with you? Was it a battle, or did you just kind of go along?
No, I honestly never had any kind of hard conversations with God. Actually, my friend David keeps telling me that he had hard conversations with God on my behalf. Because he's thinking, you know, like, Kenny's gonna stay here and be the pastor, and Kenny has such a bright future. Like no, you know, like this, it doesn't sit right, you know. So he's like he said to himself, like, he was never going to encourage me to stay and be the pastor after graduating school. You know, that would have to be something that me and the Spirit would have to work out on our own. Because he didn't see it as, you know, like, it really didn't make any sense.
Well, and Kenny, you know, because you're a smart guy, and when I heard about your story, you know, marine biology, Gales Point, lagoon, manatee, ocean, one fits to the other. This guy should be making bam, 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 sitting on top of the world. And then I'm watching you labor in what I consider those first couple of years a very thankless position. Like, I don't think, and I've had very private conversations with you as well as some other missionary friends of mine about the lack of thankfulness about what this young man is pouring into this community. Did you ever get to a place and time in your life to where you were questioning the decision to do this as opposed to doing that?
Not so much the decision to being in ministry as opposed to working in marine biology, but just I've gotten to the place number of time where it's like, so God, what's happening? Because nothing seems to be changing drastically. One would assume that after 10, 12 years of doing ministry there, the church should be at a place, or people should be at a place where I should be drying out and other people stepping in. So it's kind of like ministering the gospel to the same people over and over again. And it's kind of like, like Jeremiah, no response. What's going on here, God? Like, is it something that I'm doing wrong? Do I need to learn something different? Do I need to say something different? Do I need to read and understand the Bible differently? What's really going on? Because the progress has been so slow that sometimes you feel like, is it even worth it?
Yeah. And that's been a very, very real experience because, I have a deep love for Gales Point. When I walk through Gales Point, I'm walking in there in two different aspects. Reality, looking at what my eyes see, because I see what I see. But then I am, in my mind, trying to see what God sees, the potential, the hope, the future. Because people can get lost in the present because of what it looks like and how things are around them. So I try to, when I walk through there, I got to see the reality. This is where we are. But then where does God want it to be? And when I look at Gales Point, I see a village and people that God wants to exponentially bless. And I say bless not in a Western, name it and claim it, blab it and grab it foolishness. But I believe that God wants to do a work in that community. And I've oftentimes asked you, as you are continuing to turn this soil, and you turn over one soil and it's just as hard as the soil that you just turned over, it can get discouraging. And so you got Gales Point, you got Galilee Chapel in Gales Point. Now, how did you come from Gales Point to starting this other church in Belize City?
So,
because you're actually pastoring two churches.
Yeah. The other church in the city was planted by a missionary, Joel Meyer. Him and his family moved down to Belize years ago. They planted this church on the south side of Belize City, rough gang neighborhood. And I met him some years ago, maybe 2014, 2013, through a missionary friend of mine. So we kind of got to know each other. He invited me to a pastor's conference that they had, took me to Guatemala with him to a conference. So we became friends, and we were always in communication with each other. When I go up to the city, I'd, try to say hi as much as I could. But he was called by God to move back to the U.S. And he had already had, things in place. The church is functioning. They have a leadership team, youth ministry, whatnot. All these things were going on. And it just happened that months before he was supposed to leave, everything that was in place didn't really turn out to be in place. The person who was supposed to step up, or maybe who he wanted to, step up and lead the church, had some issues, what was going on. And interestingly enough, my wife and I she always knew that we were supposed to move to the city some point. At some point we were supposed to move to the city. We just didn't have any kind of plan in place. We didn't, really sit down and say, well, in a year's time we would move to the city or what's not. We were just waiting on the Lord's leading. And so Joel called me up one day and he's like, hey, so you guys are planning to move to the city sometime, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what do you think about, coming up and helping to run PLCC? Which to me was, just kind of weird that he would ask, because I'm looking at his church saying, you have all these people there, you have all these guys who can do a good job. So, why ask me? So we prayed about it, talked to some people that we trust, and had them pray with us about it, and everybody basically, came to the same conclusion that it would be a good thing, to make that transition, which would be a slow transition, because then I would have to try and raise up somebody to eventually take over Gales Point, while I focus on the ministry in the city. So that's how that transition started and how it played out. We, accepted their offer to go up and help lead and run PLCC, but at the same time, are still heavily involved with the ministry in Gales Point. So we had to switch church in Gales Point from being morning service to being a night service, so that I would preach at PLCC in the morning on Sunday, drive down to Gales Point, and then preach at Gales Point on Sunday night.
So how long have you been preaching at pastoring the one in the city?
We've been there since 2017.
Now, the one in the city is very interesting. I mean, Gales Point is one thing, but the one in the city is very interesting because it is in a hot zone.
Yeah.
A very, for lack of a better word, a hot zone. In gang, can I say infested? Heavily gang.
Yeah.
Okay. It's in a heavily gang area, right? And like gang.
Yeah.
Not like, paper gun gangs, like gang. And I was shocked to find out. So where you are, when we first came down to Belize in 2015, we went to a place in Belize City with Miss Rita Flowers. And she runs this little orphanage in Belize City. And one day we're feeding, she has maybe about 25 or so kids. And so we're feeding them, and we've been feeding them for a couple hours. And then right around the corner from her orphanage was a basketball court. So me and Brother Bray, a couple other people just walk around the corner to the basketball court. Like, no big deal. We grabbed the basketball and started dribbling the ball and just walked around the corner to the basketball court, and we're shooting goals. And Miss Rita Flowers had to be all of 80. Like 5 minutes into us shooting the basketball, Miss Rita Flowers, 80 years old, is running down the street, hits the corner, screaming, "No! Come back!" And I'm like, what's going on? Come back! So apparently when we got back to the orphanage, we were playing basketball on a court that was a gang's court, right? And she said that at any moment you could have been shot. Get back over here. So I was amazed to find out how much gang activity is in Belize. How does your church deal with that, with this constant barrage of gang violence?
It's a struggle. It has always been a struggle, and I feel like it will continue to be a struggle. The young men are targeted by the gangs at a way earlier age than they're targeted by the church. We have young men, 12, 13 years old, that are already, picking up guns and shooting at people. And that's the age where, kids are just transitioning from Sunday school to youth ministry, so to speak. Get out of elementary and start going to high school. That's when they would be invited to youth group and what's not. But because church is only like a few hours a week type deal in Belize, you show up to youth group on Saturday, and then if you feel like it, you show up to church on Sunday, what's not. The influence on the community is far greater than, the influence that the community has on people is far greater than the influence that the church has on people. Especially if they're only spending 2-3 hours a week at church, and then all the rest they're spending in the community. So they have way more interaction with the gang than they do with church folks at all time. That's what's happening. And when the false protection and false security is offered to them, they don't really see it as false protection or false security, because everybody wants to be a man. Everybody wants to be strong. Nobody wants to be disrespected, and all of that. And that's what you feel like you get when you interact with and hang out with the gang, as opposed to going to church. Going to church is usually viewed as, those guys are soft, weak, coward, you know. So that's where the big divide is. And of course, boys growing up in mostly single parent family, needing a father figure and want to look for one that seems to be strong and mighty and everybody is afraid of, would gravitate more towards those guys in the gang than they would towards somebody who's in church.
Now, is fatherlessness a big deal in Belize?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Now, you just said something so you're saying that the gangs are targeting the kids at a much earlier age than do the church.
Yeah.
So looking for that sense of brotherhood, looking for mentorship, what do you think is a draw?
I think it's more just the sense of brotherhood, the sense of having a male figure who can provide what you see as, protection and security, as opposed to gravitating to someone that the community is saying, soft, lightweight, weak people. That's how they usually view the men or guys who go to church. They're not well respected. They're not, they won't get out and punch someone in the mouth if they disrespect you or anything like that. So everybody is gravitating towards the tough macho man type, brotherhood, as opposed to real brotherhood. So
it's not just a Belizean problem in that regard, because far too long church has just been church, and we've been so insulated with our own communities and having church on Sunday, jumping up and down, sweating, hallelujah, amen, getting our shout on, and then going back home on Sunday. So church is not just a Belizean problem in that regard. It is a universal church problem. Yeah. The church has struggled to be relevant to the communities by which it lives in. It has struggled with it. It has really, really struggled to make the connection of how Jesus is important for my eternal life, but let me show you how to make Jesus irrelevant for your practical life. Yeah. And it's not just Belize, Kenny. I can promise you that American churches struggle with it gravely, because we don't know how to connect with the community that we live in outside of preaching. So come on in, come to church, come to Sunday school, come to our events. Let me get you churched up. But now, how do I help you to respond in a world that is going to be tugging at you when you leave this house? And I don't think the church has done a necessarily good job in that. So when I'm looking at church as a whole, and I've witnessed this in Belize and every other place, it's a universal problem. Now, you have a couple of churches that are doing some phenomenal job in making outreach to the communities, where they are putting those kind of men in place, right? Well, we're putting strong men, and not men that's going to necessarily go out there and slap you in your mouth when you disrespect them, but these are men that are strong, these are men that are competent, and these are men that you want to be around. And I think a lot of people that I talk to who are affiliated in that lifestyle, that is what they're looking for. And the church, unfortunately, has abdicated its role and not offered those types of men. The men are now sitting on the back rows of the pews. They're not engaged. They're not in leadership positions. And so when young men come into the church, they don't see men leading. Yeah. They see women doing everything, which reinforces this idea that men in church are weak, because they see men just kind of laying back. They don't see men engaged and involved. And I think that is a real big issue for the generation following, even in America. As you come into any church in America, you will see a plethora of women in every different ministry capacity, leading at high levels in ministry. And then you'll see the men on the other side laying in the cut, just kind of going along to get along. I go to church, I drop a couple nickels in the bucket, I listen to the sermon, and then I go home, but I'm not engaged at a really deep level. Yeah. And so when the young men come into church, they are reinforced with the idea that church guys are soft. I don't see any man leading. I don't see any man doing this, that, and the other. I see women doing everything. And so what is the draw for that young man that comes into church and doesn't see that? It's not there. And so what we desperately try to do, not just in Belize, but everywhere that we go, even here at Bethel's, is try to not put forth, I don't want to make it like we're putting forth a front, but to build up men so that men, again, listen, if you push us, we'll go there, okay? Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Now, he wasn't talking about just let you beat me up, okay? Now, just because I don't fight don't mean I can't fight. But it's not what we're trying to do at the church. What we're trying to do at the church is raise up men that are strong men in every capacity of life. So if you're looking for a strong man that's going to go out there and be bold and courageous, yeah, you can go out there and find somebody that'll pick up a gun and shoot at somebody at random. And if that's your idea of courage, that's your idea of courage. But I want to show you a man that stands up and says, I'm going to do what's right even when everybody else is doing wrong. That's courage. And seeing men lead their families, seeing men out there on the forefront of their communities and are engaged in trying to make a difference. And it's not just in Belize. I think it's a universal church problem that we are doing a horrible job to address. And so in Belize, when you got all of this stuff going on with gang members, is drug use very prevalent in Belize?
Yeah, mostly just marijuana.
So just marijuana is a deal.
For the guys, I mean, people do sell crack and stuff like that, but for the major thing that people go to is marijuana.
And marijuana is a big deal, right? Is it legal?
It's decriminalized. 10 grams, you can have 10 grams on you, and it's not a criminal offense. 10
grams is decriminalized. Okay, so marijuana is kind of the par for the course in Belize.
Yeah.
But you see the detriment of that working out in the people of Belize that are sitting around smoking weed all day?
Yeah, definitely.
So, weed is, I'm not going to go there because I don't want to chase that rabbit down that hole because he'll get stuck. I have a question for you. So, as we're going through this, and I want to transition over here because I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. COVID-19 is ravaging America, right?
Yeah.
Well, not ravaging America, but it's causing a melee. What is it doing in Belize?
Pretty much the same thing. You know, we got hit hard.
Now, what's hard? How many people?
With COVID or
how many people died from COVID?
Oh, maybe 400 or something.
How many people are in the country of Belize?
About 430,000.
So, a little under 500,000.
Yeah.
And 100 people died from COVID.
No, about 400.
About 400 people died from COVID. COVID related or COVID?
That's a problem nobody tells.
Okay, so if they had COVID, even though they had heart disease, then they actually died from COVID. That's the standard. So you got a little under 500,000 people in the country of Belize, and 400 people died from COVID. What happened with the COVID in Belize? What were some of the things that they were pressing on you guys to do?
Well, I mean, some of the same regulations that they had worldwide, you know, mask mandate, social distancing, you know, sanitizing everywhere. But we have added, I would say, probably added, yeah. So we have a curfew that runs. Presently, right now, it's from 9 at night to 4 in the morning. You're not supposed to be out. Everything is closed down. Everybody's inside. So
you have a curfew that you got to be in the house by 9 o'clock at night, and this is a COVID protocol.
Yeah.
So how is being in the house by 9 o'clock helping to prevent COVID?
That's a question for the authorities, man. I'm trying to figure that one out right now.
So I got to be in the house by 9 o'clock to stop the spread of COVID.
Yeah.
Is there a mandatory mask?
Yeah, mandatory mask when you're in public spaces. In your own car, you don't need to be wearing it unless you're carrying passengers that are not in the same household. Public transportation, there's mandatory mask. You go on the street, anywhere else, there's mandatory mask.
Now, what about the vaccines?
Well, they're trying to push that in sneaky ways. You know, they don't want to say it's mandatory, but the ways in which they're going about doing it is basically forcing it on people. Now,
is it available down there, though?
Yeah, it's available. We have the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine.
What is that?
It's a vaccine that was made in the UK, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, so it's not Pfizer, Moderna, and
No, we don't have that yet.
so what is it called?
It's the Oxford AstraZeneca.
Is that a 1-shot, 2-shot? What is it?
It's a 2-shot.
It's a 2-shot. Oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I think your president said you guys had some but weren't using it.
Oh, yeah, okay. But that's not rolled out in America. So how'd you guys?
It's rolled out in other parts of the world.
Oh, so is that mandatory? Is it voluntary right now with streaming toward mandatory?
Yeah, that's the way it's looking. So, for example, like every public servant needs to be vaccinated, or so the mandate was you're either vaccinated by August 1st or you need to present every 2 weeks a negative PCR test in order to be at work.
Now, is the PCR, is that the nose or the mouth?
That's the nose. But the PCR test costs $300 a pop. So you see what I'm saying, right? It's like either you spend $600 a month getting 2 negative tests or you just go get the vaccine.
Oh. So, okay. So, in Belize is a tourist area, right?
Yeah.
So, you guys have been hit pretty hard by COVID-19 because a lot of your GDP comes from tourism, right?
Yeah.
So, you guys have been hit quite hard with COVID-19 and travel restrictions and all of the like. What does that look like for you guys on the ground? I mean, has it made an already bad situation worse? What does that look like in the day-to-day operations of Belize?
Well, when COVID hit and tourism shut down, I think the stats is that we had 68,000 people out of a job.
68,000.
Yeah, our working class is probably only like 100 and some odd thousand people. But tourism account for 50% or more than 50% of our income for the country. So I believe the country went from making about $42 million a month to making around $20 million a month.
Wow. Just from tourism being cut off.
Yeah, during COVID. So that was big. And right now they're just trying to put regulations in place to where tourism can come back safely, or they call it safely, So vaccinated tourists have more privilege than unvaccinated tourists.
Yeah, vaccinated people have more privileges than unvaccinated people. Yeah, it's a thing that is constantly more and more playing out around the world. Yeah, so I mean that's quite a big jump from 42 down to 20, and that has affected other industries in your sector as well. I was hearing about the teacher strike that came. That they how much did they decrease the teacher salary?
10%
across the board.
Yeah, teachers and other public servants, so like police officers, soldiers, government workers.
And do you feel that right now, as just a citizen of Belize, do you feel those cuts coming down to where you are?
Yeah, it trickles down to everywhere because people are not able to do the same things they used to do. When you're making less, so you're now in a position to where you have to budget differently and spend less, and maybe you can't help the people you used to help because you don't have that extra, that was there for you to help those people. So it trickles down all the way to the bottom.
So what about COVID in school? Now you got 2 kids. What has COVID done to the school? Because I'm interested in this, because this is, what has COVID done to the schools?
So the schools that were able to do it were online through all of it, even up until now. School is supposed to open sometime later this month or early September, and there is no talk as to whether it's going to be in-person school or still online school. Now, in places like Gales Point where they're not able to go online, the teachers show up at school, they bring a packet with assigned work for the week, and then the kids or parents have to go to school, pick up that packet, take it home, get that section of work done, and then bring it back to the school, turn that in, and pick up another packet to go and do again. So for the most part, like in Gales Point, the parents have to now be teachers to their own kids,
So, in a conference call that I had, well, I don't want to mention any names, a Zoom call that I had a couple of weeks ago, and talking about the COVID response, I brought up the point that COVID in America has done a number, but because of the robust capitalist society in America, even as bad as it was, America will eventually bounce back economically. So all the money that we lost through the shutting down of industries in COVID 2020, especially because of the robust American economy, it will bounce back. But in third world countries and other countries outside of America, I think they're going to have a very difficult time trying to make up those shortfalls that COVID has shut off. And when you're looking at what's going on in Belize, what's going on in Honduras, what's going on in Guatemala, what's going on in Argentina right now, Argentina just put forth a law that says you cannot come into the country, tourists or other, unless you have been vaccinated, to which they will ask for your vaccination verification. So they're not even letting people in the country now unless they've been vaccinated, which is going to have ripple effects all the way down. As I see this thing kind of progressing forward, and now you have the Delta variant, do y'all have that as well?
That's what they were saying. I'm not sure if it came back positive or not, but they had to send some samples out of country to test to verify if it was the Delta variant or not. Because there's been some outbreaks in some of the communities down south that were concerning to the health officials. Did
you know anybody that personally got affected by COVID?
Yeah, I know a number of people who had COVID, recovered. I don't know anybody who has died personally.
And have made full recoveries?
Yeah.
So as you see what's going on right now in Belize, and Belize is a beautiful, beautiful country, but it's got a lot of different things going on at the same time, okay? What do you see Belize in the next 5-10 years?
That's a good question. Down the road that we're going right now, things don't seem to be looking much better. We're hoping that what the government is doing is going to be progressing towards things being better. But every so often they make decisions and do things that make people go, oh, it's only going to get worse.
You keep saying the government. Do Belizeans place a high regard on government and what they do and their capacity?
Yeah, because everything that they do either helps or hurt, the population. And corruption usually spread wide. So the decisions that are made up top in the government can either make life easier and better for the people or make it worse for the people. Right now, I think we're kind of getting to some level of stability as far as the economy getting back, tourism coming back a little bit. People who are unemployed are now getting back to work a little bit. But at the same time, with all the pay cuts and the restrictions and other stuff like that, it's kind of like they want the economy to improve, but at the same time, they're limiting how the economy improves. Because when you have restaurants who are usually making their peak at 9-10 o'clock at night,
now they shut down.
Now they have to be shut down by 7:45. That it limits.
And there's no subsidies for the time in which they got to close early, so they're not getting. Like if I'm making 25% of my income from 9 to 11, but now I have to shut down at 9. Is there any subsidy from the government that says we're going to help you because we know a lot of your money came between those hours and now we're forcing you to shut down? Is there any connection?
No, nothing that's been publicized, nothing that we know of.
Now we had stimulus and all that other stuff. Were there any type of government programs like that where they help the citizens and people?
Yeah, they did COVID relief. Mm-hmm. People who lost their jobs due to COVID could apply for COVID relief, and there will be a process, fill out an application you go through. If you get approved, then your $75 a week would come in. Every 2 weeks you'd get it deposited into your account or what's not. But I think that only happened for about 9 months or so. I don't know, 6 months or something.
So is the government really broke? Is Belize really broke, as they say that it is?
That's what they're saying. But every so often you hear money is being spent on other stuff that makes you think, yeah, maybe we're not as broke. But they're saying we're broke. What they call it, the wage bill is around, I don't know, $600 million or something. And they have to decrease that in order to, because there's also debt that the country has to be paying and all that stuff going on. So,
have you had any more flights coming in on the coastal road that have found anything?
All over the place, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's a way another story.
That's another story.
That's a way another story. So let me ask you this, man, as we one of the reasons why I love Pastor Kenny is because of your heart for the community that you serve in. I love Belize, and I often say that when we go on mission trips, we often go to the places that are not on the postcards, because those places are generally the places that need it the most. As you see what God is doing in Belize, are you encouraged? So, not encouraged? I mean, where are you at right now spiritually with what's going on in Belize?
I think right now, from my own personal feeling, I'm encouraged, because I think it's high time to minister the truth of the gospel to people, especially right now with so much voices in the air and people falling into fear as opposed to putting their hope and trust in Jesus Christ. It's high time to point people towards something that is more secure eternally than just focusing on the here and now that is happening and thinking that the here and now is where everything is at, when that's not where everything is at. People need a hope to have right now, because everybody is just buying into the news and thinking, oh, COVID is the end of humanity, we're going to die, what's not, but I think right now I'm encouraged because it's high time for the gospel.
Pastor Kenneth Welch, I call him Pastor Kenny. I was getting ready to say your middle name, but I didn't. Pastor Kenny, pastor of Galilee Chapel in Gales Point and Port
Loyola Calvary Chapel.
Yeah, that right there. Port what?
Loyola.
Yeah, that. In Belize City. Man, God bless you, brother. Should the Lord say the same? He's down here visiting us in Houston, Texas for a few days, having some great fellowship, man. We've greatly enjoyed that. Should the Lord say the same, we'll be back to Belize twice for sure, possibly 3 times next year. Coming down there, bringing some team, man, to love on the people and do some things that me and you have talked about that I think God wants to do in the wonderful village of Gales Point and even more corporately in Belize. I do believe that one person at a time, we need to develop that and see what the Lord's going to do with that. So, man, I want to thank you, man, and I want to make sure you said you had a wife and you had 2 kids, but you didn't say their names. Now, don't make any grave mistakes like that, man. So whenever time you're on public, acknowledge your people by name. So won't you go ahead and look at your camera and talk to your wife and your kids? Won't you tell us their names?
Oh, so my wife, Una Welch. And
Say hi. She'll be watching.
Yeah, just wave. And my 2 daughters, my oldest, Anaya Welch, she's 7, and my youngest, the fire starter, Nissa Welch, 3 years old.
Anaya and Nissa, my girls, they just warm my heart, man. They just warm my heart. Man, thank you so very much for coming on here, man. I appreciate you. Pastor Kenny's been hanging out with us for the last few days, kind of getting a perspective of what we do. And I hope by you coming down, you see which is why I wanted you to come down for so long, so that you can see some behind the scene deals and really start to get the wheels turning about the real work that we can do in Gales Point. and not just in Gales Point, but in the greater region of Belize. So everybody, I want to thank you again for joining us here on the set of Studio B. Remember, this video, there's a little button to the right of the subscribe, a little bell. Make sure that you click that so that you stay in the know, so that every time a new video is dropped on Studio B, you will be notified. And remember, Courageous Conversations is getting ready to come up here very, very soon. And listen. I ain't scared of y'all. We gonna talk about what we need to talk about, even if it ruffles some feathers. I promise you that's what you're gonna get on Studio B. We gonna let it all hang out and then leave God to judge it. But I appreciate you guys joining us here on the set of Studio B. Remember, be empowered, be informed, Studio B.